Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have a momentous show for you today. That sounds exciting. Briahna, what is going on?
Well, we have Eric Lovitz joining us to discuss that soup throwing incident heard around the world. Plus, we'll get into some Georgia midterms updates. But first, the country's top Democrats are making their final pitches to voters ahead of November voting. At a campaign speech in Washington, D.C. this week, President Biden concluded his appearance by promising to send legislation protecting access to abortion to Capitol Hill next session.
Here's the promise I make to you and the American people. The first bill that I will send to the Congress will be to codify Roe v. Wade.
Despite the president's impassioned ninth inning pledge, abortion has yet to crack voters' top concerns this election cycle. It is not registering as highly as inflation, crime, immigration, for instance. The Hill's Hannah Trudeau notes, quote, abortion as a closing pitch was always going to be a really risky proposition, but up against the economy, it makes it look almost fringe. Of course, many people will disagree with this, but the cost of gas is extremely important to nearly everyone. Abortion is simply not. However, when challenged over Democrats' messaging priorities, House Majority Leader Nancy Pelosi denied that inflation and crime were actually top of voters' minds. Let's watch.
You and the president have done so much in terms of domestic concerns, the economy. So why is this message? Why do you think the president has gotten this message through the voters?
Well, first of all, let me say that I think that much of what you've said I don't agree with. That is to say, the New York Times poll, I think, is an outlier poll. You cite one poll, but all the other polls.
It's also the Real Clear Politics average is showing similar issues.
No, but that was one that brought down the average, and it was an outlier. It wasn't even that big a sample. So I dismiss that.
It's such a weird debate to me because treating abortion versus talking about the economy as a zero-sum game, nobody asked you to do that. I think you saw this when Bernie Sanders made the same recommendation last week. Hey, Democrats, you've got to also talk about the economy. People attacked him as though he was saying that abortion doesn't matter and abortion isn't important. And of course it is, right? We saw how well the abortion ballot measure did, defeating the constitutional amendment in Kansas did, how it motivated a lot of people to go to the polls. And I think that it is important to, make some commitments about abortion as an issue. It has been a mobilizing issue for Democrats to get to the polls. However, this resistance to also accommodating people's interest in the economy and having their kitchen table issues and budget concerns met, it's really odd.
Yeah, it is really odd. And it's where you focus on. It is, I do think abortion is getting a lot of attention from Joe Biden, from Nancy Pelosi, from leading Democrats, which is not to say that, I think that it is a winning issue for Democrats, given how far Republicans in some places have gone. Of course, there's a little bit of going too far, I think, with some Democrats. You saw, I think John Fetterman was asked about it. I believe the Arizona gubernatorial candidate was asked about it on the Democratic side, and asked kind of really easy questions about, well, do you favor any limitations, essentially, on abortion at all? And they both said no. And I think, the right, up until birth, you could just say no. Abortion, should be legal. Republicans are extremists. They want to criminalize. They want
that's interesting.
14-year-olds who've suffered sexual assault to not be able to have abortions, etc. But you could just say, but I don't favor late-term abortion.
I support the standards that existed for the overturning of Roe v. Wade, or Dobbs, which is or Casey, rather, overturning of Casey, which is the standard that overwhelming majorities of Americans, including
I think in many cases
support.
you have both. You have Republicans who support, who oppose abortion rights or support abortion restrictions that are far outside what most people want, and then in some places you have Democrats that support them to a degree somewhat outside.
Well, I think that is not entirely true. I don't think that the kind of mythology around late-term abortions was taking a lot of instances where these were wanted pregnancies that were not going to be viable and kind of mischaracterizing women who are in a really tough position of having to basically terminate a pregnancy to either save their lives, that pregnancy they wanted, because otherwise why would you have carried it to 9 months?
Right.
Or the baby wasn't going to be.
But almost no Republicans favor that kind of restriction either.
Well, sure, but they definitely messaged for decades around the idea that Democrats were just trying to kill babies in the 9th month for no reason at all. And I do think that when they ask things like, do you support any restrictions, they're setting a trap for Democrats to say no and then recreate this idea that there's an indifference to kind of a 9-month-old baby that is about to be born being killed in a way that is not medically indicated and never actually happens. But the Democrats' other problem with this abortion issue is that they're the boy who cried wolf. They have been talking about codifying Roe v. Wade forever. And I think there was a lot of really healthy outrage from even mainstream neo-lib corporate Democratic voter types around the Dobbs decision, because they woke up and there was this moment where like the left has been screaming for a long time. They were like, Democratic Party, what have you been doing? And why should we trust you to do the right thing if we just keep voting for you? Barack Obama, in the famous clips that have been circulating around, said when he was running that it was going to be a top tier priority for him. He gets into office and then gives a speech saying it's just not high on my agenda right now. So it does feel really manipulative for them to be dangling this over Democratic voters when they've had literally decades to codify this if they really cared.
Well, we're still a couple weeks away from Election Day. However, Democrats are already playing the blame game in the event that they don't do very well, and placing much of that blame at the leader of their party himself, President Biden, and his administration's handling of inflation. He stands to catch most of the flack, according to The Hill's Amy Parnes. Her Democratic sources say the president will end up being, quote, the fall guy for the party's midterm performance, even if some don't think that criticism is entirely fair. Now, again, the president's party often performs poorly in this election, the election following his election. So the expectations were kind of low. Now, we are also going through just a horrible time in the economy that I would put some blame on the administration's policies. Some of it is not avoidable. It's just kind of happening. So you would think, actually, that Republicans would be set up for a massive victory. We're actually not contemplating a massive victory. We're going back and forth a little bit. There was a period where it was looking like they were going to have a blowout. Then it was like, well, they're really underperforming expectations. Now, frankly, I think we all expect the House to go to Republicans. The Senate we have these like 5 very close races. So it's very close. If they all break one way, it could end up looking like a massive Republican victory. I don't expect that to happen, but it could happen. You could also have Democrats increase, and it's 50-50 with Kamala Harris. They could get to 51. They could get to 52. I'm looking at the races and which way I think they might go. I kind of expect Democrats to get to 51, but we'll see. So that actually puts it on Republicans. They should be doing better, and they have some candidates that are not great, that are a little outside, too far right, given where Arizona is, given where Pennsylvania is. And look, the party needs to shed itself of Trump. It just does. And then it could be with DeSantis right now as the leader of the Republican conservative movement with Glenn Youngkin style candidates. They would be set up for like the end of history. This would be like 1980. This would be a massive Republican red wave. I think we're going to get like a little baby wave. Yeah. It's a missed opportunity. Huge missed opportunity. We'll obviously
see, and if Joe Biden takes the blame for his party's failures, I got to say it would feel like a first from a progressive standpoint. I can feel Abigail Spanberger type Democrats generating their Election Day takes about how it was defund the police, something that, frankly,
you
is not really a part of this conversation.
Out there saying the S word and spooking voters into going
the two
Republican.
Socialists left. We don't even like our own socialists in Congress at this point, but somehow I'm sure it'll be their fault. But we'll be talking more about inflation and whose fault it really is in My Radar next. Stick with us.